Is Israel collapsing? Are they at risk of starvation? Could one of the world's most powerful armies be heading toward self-destruction? What started as a war to erase Hamas has spiraled into something much darker, a battle that's draining Israel from the inside. And in this special segment, Colonel Douglas Macgregor joins us to expose the real reason behind the sudden ceasefire, the economic freefall, and the possibility that Israel is destroying itself from within. Don't miss what he has to say, it will shock you. Israel's war on Hamas, from eradication to collapse. When Israel launched its military offensive against Hamas in late 2023, its goal was crystal clear: eliminate the group once and for all. But after months of airstrikes, ground battles, and civilian casualties, Hamas is still standing and even adapting with deadly new tactics. Rather than being crushed, Hamas has shifted strategies, using urban guerrilla warfare, tunnel ambushes, and coordinated drone attacks to bog down the IDF. Their resilience, bolstered by support from Iran and Hezbollah, is transforming the war into a prolonged, multi-front nightmare for Israel. A ceasefire born out of weakness. While Israeli officials claim humanitarian concerns prompted the proposed ceasefire, military experts, including Colonel Douglas Macgregor, argue otherwise. The truth may lie in two harsh realities. Economic collapse. Israel is spending billions daily. Its tech sector is faltering, investments are vanishing, and the prolonged war has paralyzed key industries. Weapon shortage. Despite U.S. aid, Israel is running low on precision munitions, Iron Dome interceptors, and essential military equipment. A regional trap set by Iran? Hamas's survival benefits Iran, which is using the chaos to escalate tensions on Israel's northern front via Hezbollah. This strategy is stretching Israeli forces thin, threatening a regional war Israel can barely afford. In conclusion, Israel is fighting a war without victory in sight. Israel's promise to wipe out Hamas has turned into a slow bleed. With its economy reeling and military options narrowing, some fear Israel may be pushing itself toward collapse from within. Stay with us as Colonel Douglas Macgregor breaks down the most critical questions. Why did Israel really agree to a ceasefire? Is the economy collapsing beyond repair? Is Israel heading toward a self-inflicted disaster?
I think we have to understand three things. First of all, Israel was running out of cash and missiles, and that's the principal reason for the ceasefire. The Israeli economy is in ruins. Smotrich, who is the name of the man who's the finance minister, who is probably one of the most violent anti-Palestinian Arabs and advocates for war against Islam everywhere, actually spoke publicly and said, we've got another week, maybe 2 weeks left, and then our economy implodes completely. And then, of course, about a week, I think it's less than a week ago, you had Ben-Gvir, another member of the Netanyahu inner circle who violently hates and wants to destroy Muslims and Arabs. He made the comment that they had underestimated the strength and potential of the Iranian missile arsenal. So I think if you look at those two things and you understand that every time a missile comes in, or a drone or something else, the predisposition is to fire 2 missiles to take it out. So if you have one missile that costs $1 million that is directed at Israel, and you're going to fire 2 missiles, each of which costs $2 million, that means you're spending $4 million to shoot down a $1 million missile. So what you do is you overwhelm the defense. You just send lots and lots and lots of missiles. The Israelis can't possibly stop them all. And on top of that, they're going broke, and they've got ruins everywhere. Haifa and Tel Aviv have sustained serious damage, along with the ports, military installations, airfields. It's a disaster. So the Israelis actually need a ceasefire. Now, does that mean they're willing to give up their aims and stop the war? No, I don't think so. If there's one thing we can say with absolute certainty, it is that virtually everyone in the region, all the Muslim Arabs, Turks, Persians, have all reached the same conclusion. They cannot coexist with this Jewish state. The Jewish state is dedicated, devoted to their destruction. So they can't coexist with it. So I don't see anything positive emerging anytime soon. I don't see an end to this conflict. I think whatever happens, it'll be a break. And clearly, the Israelis will try to rearm, refit, get ready for the next round. I see no evidence that they're going to give up. Of course, now they have another problem. Millions of people inside Israel are living in very dangerous circumstances, and hundreds of thousands have already left. More are leaving. So many have left that they're now buying up vast tracts of real estate on the island of Cyprus. It's gotten so bad that one of the leading politicians on Cyprus spoke yesterday and said, "Stop. We're losing control of our country. The Israelis are buying everything." Well, why are they buying up real estate on Cyprus? Obviously, they plan to move there and live there, not stay in Israel. I think that's the tip of the iceberg. So Israel has a problem with outward emigration, keeping its population where it is. There are only 9 million people in Israel. 2 million are Arabs. The other 7 million are Jews. And the Arabs aren't leaving, they're staying. So that means numbers of people in the 7 million want to leave and get out of the country and go someplace else. That's not a good sign. It's similar to Ukraine's position. In fact, I think Zelensky and Netanyahu are in similar positions right now. Ukraine has lost millions of people that have left the country. They have at least 1.5 million dead soldiers. Now, Israel doesn't have that many dead, but large numbers of people have left. More are likely to go. So I don't see anything happening to resolve the fundamental conflict that is raging between Israel and in fact, the entire Middle East. He's very dependent upon donors in the United States who are huge supporters of the Israel lobby. He would not be in office today if it were not for them. So I don't see much evidence that he's prepared to abandon Israel, but I know that he has resisted being pulled directly into the war. These strikes that you just saw fell on empty buildings, targets where there was neither people nor technology. And the Iranians were told we were coming, we were going to bomb these sites. So they got out and they didn't turn on their radars. They didn't fire any air defense missiles. And then subsequently, the next day, they informed us that they were going to strike one of our bases in Bahrain. And we had already evacuated everyone from the base in Bahrain. And so they destroyed it, but no one was killed. Iran does not want to go to war with us. Neither does Russia, neither does China or anyone else. No one wants to go to war with us. That's not because they're just all living in fear. War is stupid. It's bad for business. It destroys property. It ruins lives. So they don't want a war with us, but they're stuck with this Israeli state that has made war on them. In the middle sits Donald Trump, who wants to do everything he can for Israel, but doesn't really want to be at war with the world for Israel.
What was your reaction when you found out that the U.S. had actually bombed those nuclear sites?
Well, I was skeptical at first, and then I began to wonder how this could happen. And it took some time before I detected that it was really a PR stunt. It was not a serious military operation. And whenever you hear politicians say, "Our men in uniform are the greatest and our armed forces are great and we owe them," you immediately step back and say, "Wait a minute, I smell something wrong here." And I think that's what we have to understand. Every politician stands up and distracts people by talking about how great the military is to get them off the subject they don't want to address. The truth is we hit nothing. We spent $100 million to hit nothing. We flew all these aircraft, put all those ships over there. So the question is, what happens next? Do they sit there in perpetuity trying to prevent Israel from being destroyed? Or do they leave? Will there be an agreement? Is an agreement even possible? I'm not sure it is.
So what military posture would you advise President Trump to take?
Well, I would advise it. I would not have struck anything. Obviously, everybody thinks that was a brilliant move, and it's a demonstration, not a serious military attack. I think at this point, I think he's made the right decision to back away. I think we should make it abundantly clear that we are not going to attack Iran under any circumstances unless they directly respond to Israel. In other words, if they attack Israel. Now, if the Israelis attack them again, as they did in the past, in other words, they start the war, we can't absolutely blame the Iranians for not responding. The real challenge is that what do you do with Israel? What do you do with all its billionaire donors that are holding you hostage to support for Israel? How do you convince them that it's in the interest of the Israeli people to end this war? See, from the very beginning, when this whole thing started, my greatest concern was The Israelis are on a suicidal path. 9 million versus 92 million. And the 92 million, contrary to popular belief, are not ignorant peasants that know nothing. Who are we kidding? This is a new world. This isn't 46 years ago. We have to recognize that we're not alone on this planet as a superpower. There are other nations that are very capable, have talented populations that can produce real military power. So he really has to get Israel out of the business of attacking its neighbors. He's got the Egyptian army sitting on the Israeli border right now, ready to pounce. They're waiting to see what happens next. Nobody likes the Israelis. Nobody wants the Israelis. Everybody hates the Israelis. How do you change that?
Your statements are very provocative. Do you fear that you could be labeled anti-Semitic?
Oh, sure. Everybody that stands up and counters the narrative. Oh, you're an anti-Semite. You're evil. You're this, whatever. Come on, listen. I'm no longer concerned about that sort of thing. I think number one, I'm worried about the United States. I'm worried about America, and I think that was something else that was on Trump's mind. And he was worried what would happen if they disrupted the oil flow out of the Persian Gulf. And he should be concerned about that, even though that won't affect us immediately as much as it will the rest of the world. That could have a terrible effect on the global economy. And our economy is weak. We're in a very delicate position right now. Our financial system is very fragile. Look at the NVIDIA sell-off. I mean, we could sit here for hours and talk about all the things that are happening. Nassim Taleb, the man who wrote the book Black Swan, who tries to talk about the consequences of our sovereign national debt and mishandling of finances, he's pointed out that gold is now the true reserve currency. Oh, there are countries that will do business in dollars, but the dollar is no longer seen as a store of value. Now we have the Germans and the Italians who want 145 billion in gold returned to them. And people are waiting to see that happen. Do we have the gold? There are all sorts of terrible things that can happen to us, far worse than anything going on in the Middle East. And I think President Trump does appreciate that. But the real problem here is, what do you do about Netanyahu and his government? Because if he recovers at all, gets more equipment, more ammunition, more missiles, they will go back at it again. There's no alternative as far as they're concerned. Can we have snap elections in Israel? Can a new government come to power there? Let's say a new government does and takes a different approach. Will anybody believe them? By the way, will anybody believe us anymore? I mean, we've lied about so many things to so many people for so many years now. It's hard to imagine fashioning a solution that anybody would have faith or confidence in.
Does Iran pose a threat to the United States?
No, and it never has. And its nuclear development was never aimed at a weapon, contrary to popular belief. Now, what they have done is they have moved all the uranium enrichment centrifuges and other technologies to other locations. Not sure we know where they are, but they're somewhere else. Now, could they build a bomb? I suppose they could, but they recently announced that they refuse to leave the non-proliferation treaty environment. In other words, they've said we're not going to violate the NPT. And in fact, the argument for many years has been, well, why can't we have a nuclear-free zone? Well, because of Israel. But Israel won't even admit to having nuclear weapons, but we know they've got at least 300 warheads. Well, what stops Israel from using those weapons? Because I think the Israelis know that if they use one of those weapons now, a similar weapon will be used against them. It will arrive somewhere, somehow, from somebody. I don't think the Russians or the Chinese, Pakistanis, anybody in the Muslim world, they're not going to simply stand by and watch Israel pulverize Iran into submission and subjugation. Certainly not with nuclear weapons. So what do we do from here? Are we going to treat Israel as a normal state and tell them that there are some alternatives, but we're not going to support whatever they do in the future? I don't think so, but we'll see.
And why is that? Why can't the United States, which is a bigger power?
Well, you just explained it. You just told me. So aren't you worried about being called an anti-Semite? Anybody who suggests that anything should be different with Israel is immediately an anti-Semite. If you're somebody like Professor Jeffrey Sachs, well, then you are scorned as a so-called self-loathing Jew. I mean, the ad hominem attacks always indicate that there's no argument. When you start attacking people on the basis of their race, on the basis of their, social standing, their political views, you've lost the argument. And that's what's going on. So anybody who stands up and says, we need to do business with Israel differently, the Israelis need to take a different approach, well, then you must be an anti-Semite, because the Israelis can only have one approach that gives them dominance, supremacy, hegemony in the region. Israel has to change its approach if it has any chance whatsoever of surviving in the region. You know, this is not a Bruce Lee movie. Israel is not Bruce Lee and defeats the 52 people that show up in the span of 60 seconds behind the whatever it is, the green screen or blue screen. In other words, this is real life. If they want to live in this part of the world, they're going to have to alter their views. Ever since the 7th of October over a year ago, they spent all of their time telling everyone that they were subhuman, Amalek, animals that deserve to be slaughtered. So if you're an Arab who lives in the Emirates or Saudi Arabia or Egypt or Algeria, wherever you are, you're Amalek. What a terrible thing. How do you recover from that? You have to renounce that. You have to reject it. It's contemptible. I don't know if that can be done. President Trump is a brilliant marketer. He's a marketing genius. This is someone who could sell snow to Eskimos, okay? He does that very well. It's not very meaningful. This is somebody who said, well, I closed the border, I built this great wall, and I'm making the Mexicans pay for it. How did that go? Not very well.
Get a new job, loser!
We're supposedly restoring the rule of law, and we're supposed to deport people that don't belong here, that came in. How's that going? We're not deporting very many people because we're not organized to do it. We have no strategy, we have no plan. In other words, there's a lot of bombast, but there's not a lot of evidence for systematic planning and execution. So I think what you're getting right now is that President Trump sat there and said, wait a minute, do I want the Straits of Hormuz to close? Am I going to let this war go on and potentially spread? I just got off the phone with President Putin, and he listened to him. And who knows what was actually said there. I think he made it pretty clear, that is Putin, that they would stand by Iran. And so he said, whoops, I've got to intervene in this and stop this somehow.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.
So he imposed a ceasefire. But now what? Have you heard the now what? I haven't heard the now what.
And Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. If that happens, what will that mean to the American public?
Well, initially, we're going to watch the rest of the world struggle with that because they're more dependent upon the oil that comes out of there, especially China, Japan, Korea. The Koreans and Japanese were supposed to come as observers to the NATO conference, and they have both said, no, we're not coming. The Asians think we've lost our minds. As soon as we bombed in Iran, they thought we'd lost our minds. They're not interested in war. They don't want war. They want stability, they want predictability, and they want peace. So they see us as erratic and dangerous.
What a crowd.
The Trump supporters may think this is wonderful and President Trump is being tough. But the real question is, what happens after you bomb? And what's happening? Well, a ceasefire. What does that really mean? How long will that last? What will it produce? What is it designed to accomplish? Is this an opportunity for people to meet and talk over what can be rectified? I don't think Witkoff is going to be taken seriously anymore by the Iranians under any circumstances. He was part of the big deception plan to get the Iranians to sit around at the table and believe there was some hope for a negotiated settlement. I don't think the Russians are going to take Witkoff seriously at all because of his connectivity to the same kind of problem in Ukraine. So, I just don't know the answer. Everybody says, well, tell us the answer. What's happening? I'm not Nostradamus. I wish that I were. But my point is that I don't see any long-term strategic thinking yet. I see no plan for any kind of resolution. That has to present itself. Or this ceasefire will be used to refit, reorganize, replenish, and Netanyahu will continue to do in the future what he's done in the past. And that means that Iran will go back to the barricades and fight.
So there's a lot of talk about Iran having internal crisis. Do you believe that maybe leadership will change because of everything that's going on?
No, in fact, the opposite is the case. If you wanted to strengthen the government in Iran, you just did all that you could possibly do. This may come as a surprise to many people, but most people, most of the time, prefer their own government, even if they don't like everybody in it, to somebody else's government. Now, the Israelis apparently recruited, cultivated, and set up the former Shah's son to come in, ride in as the savior for Iran to be their puppet, because that's the way the Iranians look at it. What a terrible thing to do. The Iranians are absolutely 100% backing their government at this point. They're rounding up everybody and their brother who sold out to the Mossad for money and executing them. If anything, the so-called evil mullahs that everybody hoped to get rid of are now more in power than ever before. And by the way, Iran today bears very little resemblance to the Iran of 46 years ago. But Americans don't know that because the Israelis and their supporters in this country have created the illusion that Iran is unchanged from what it was 46 years ago. And it has changed profoundly. I talked just last night with some Iranians, and they mentioned something I thought was profoundly interesting. They had been in Qom, Q-O-M. This is a city that is the theological center of Shia Islam. And they had been there during Ramadan. They had come from an Arab country, from Egypt, in fact, flown in there. And they were shocked because in Egypt, everyone was observing Ramadan, which means that you fast from morning until sunset. Nobody paid any attention to it whatsoever. Women were not running around in bags. They didn't have all their heads covered. In fact, it looked like a European city. So Iran is different from what we think it is.
Your advice to Americans who may be extremely concerned about a possibility of World War III.
There will be no World War III if we don't want one, because no one wants World War III against us. So forget it. We need to stop resorting to military power as the first option in diplomacy. We have to begin to let the rest of the world live as it sees fit. We have to understand that we're part of a larger world. And great states like Iran, these are ancient civilizational states. So is Turkey. So is India. So is China. So is Russia. We have to respect them. We have to treat other people's national security interests as legitimate. We expect them to treat our interests in their countries as legitimate. This is a very strange situation, but we refuse to accept the truth that they too have legitimate security interests at home. And then secondly, I would say we have a lot of problems. You're in Los Angeles. You know what it's like. We have serious problems inside the United States. We need to deal with those. And that's not what we're doing, but that's what we all voted for President Trump to do. He has to come home. We need to bring our troops home. We're going to need them inside the United States. But that's not happening right now. It should, but it hasn't.